Hello and welcome to this episode of the Center for Survivor Agency and Justice. We are having expert advisor spotlights, and today we are thrilled to feature Sarah Mancini, who works with the National Consumer Law Center as well as Atlanta Legal Aid. And just to couch this, CSAJ strives to develop and promote transformative advocacy that removes systemic barriers, enhances organizational responses, and improves professional practices to meet the self-defined needs of domestic and sexual violence survivors. This work really centers around the intersection of poverty and domestic violence. So in order to do this work, multiple partnerships with expertise in diverse issue areas are essential to enhancing economic security for survivors. So CSAJ is thrilled to have such a coalition of wonderful organizations and advisors at our back, really informing and guiding our work. And so today we welcome and are honored by Sarah, who's going to share a little bit about who she is, her work her work outside of CSAJ and in partnership with us, and also offer some reflection on our efforts, our collective efforts to address the intersection of poverty and domestic violence. So thank you again, Sarah, and take it away.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk with you today. So as you mentioned, I'm an attorney with the National Consumer Law Center, and I split my time between the National Consumer Law Center and Atlanta Legal Aid. And with both of those organizations, I work on mortgage and debt issues and also consumer bankruptcy. So on my legal aid half of my time, I represent homeowners who are at risk of foreclosure and trying to save their home and who are overwhelmed by debt. And on my NCLC time, I work on policy and research and writing, and also working on NCLC's consumer law manuals that help attorneys who are handling consumer law cases, and also conduct trainings for attorneys around the country on these issues to help the lawyers who are in the trenches representing consumers. So I got involved with CSAJ when I began to work on the guidebook for survivors of intimate partner violence. That is a project CSAJ has been working on, and NCLC is collaborating with you on that. And in that, what we're trying to do is to really help advocates who work with survivors have more familiarity with consumer law and debt issues that can impact survivors' economic stability and ability to sort of move forward in their plan for safety and economic security. And part of what we're doing in the guidebook is really trying to spell out the consumer law protections and legal terms of art that people need to understand, but to try to spell it out in a way that is, number one, in normal language that people, non-lawyers, could also understand, and also really with a survivor-centered focus. And looking at bankruptcy and foreclosure in particular, those are the parts of the guidebook that I've worked on, through a lens of how these issues impact survivors of intimate partner violence, and what someone who's working with survivors would need to know to help that survivor figure out their options and move forward if they're overwhelmed by consumer debt or facing the risk of foreclosure. So I've really enjoyed working on that project with CSAJ. And in particular, one of the things I've been thinking about as I was working on those chapters is issues that a lot of survivors face with regard to mortgage debt when they become the owner of a home, either after a separation or a divorce from a partner, but maybe they're not the original borrower on the mortgage loan. And that's an issue that I worked on a lot with NCLC. On the policy side, NCLC submitted comments to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who just recently issued a rule on that topic that will help a lot of survivors who maybe have become the owner of a home, but they were not the original borrower on the mortgage. And there's actually a story that I think is helpful to share to illustrate that problem, which is regarding a client who I worked with on my Atlanta Legal Aid time, and we'll call her Miss R. Ms. R came to our office, and she was a survivor of intimate partner violence, and she had gotten divorced in 2011 and came to us recently in 2015 because she was at risk of losing her home. In the divorce, when they got their divorce, she was awarded the house. The divorce decree said that she should get the house and be able to continue living there, and that her ex-husband would have to continue paying the mortgage for 4 years. But after that time, she was required to take responsibility for the mortgage. And the divorce decree actually said that she was required to assume the loan and get her husband released from the mortgage. Because when they originally bought the house, the mortgage loan was in his name only, and she had not been a co-borrower. So the divorce decree said she'll be the owner of the house, but at the end of 4 years, she's required to assume the loan and get him released from the mortgage. So there were a couple problems that she was facing. One was he was not cooperating with her efforts to assume the mortgage. He was refusing to give her any information about the mortgage. And at one point, she didn't even know which bank we needed to be communicating with that had the mortgage loan, because he was refusing to give her any information and was telling the bank that they could not communicate with her. So it was making it impossible for her to comply with the divorce decree. And at the same time, he had stopped making the mortgage payments, so she was facing the risk of foreclosure. At the same time, she had now come to this point in time where she was supposed to assume the loan, and so he was threatening her with a contempt action, or actually threatening to evict her and their 4 children from the house if she didn't comply. So fortunately, we were able to represent her in filing a motion for contempt against him because he had not cooperated with her and also had stopped paying child support. And we were able to work with her in contacting the mortgage company and going through the assumption process, where she was able to become the borrower on the mortgage and eventually to get him released from the loan, which is a tricky process. But in working with her, we were able to help her navigate that process and maintain her home, and actually required him to bring the mortgage current, and she picked up the payments from there. So that was just one case that I worked on where I really saw how mortgage issues can impact survivors of violence, and whether the survivor stays or whether the survivor leaves and separates from the abusive partner, there are a whole host of issues that come up. And hopefully the guidebook that CSAJ is working on and that NCLC is collaborating on will help advocates to be able to navigate that process. And looking forward into the future, I think CSAJ's mission of achieving economic justice for survivors is extremely important. And my view of economic justice is basically a system in which we can promote fairness so that people can achieve dignity in their work, and basically, first of all, to be able to have a living wage, so that you can so that survivors and other low-income people can support themselves economically through work, but then also to fight against financial scams that put survivors at risk of losing that financial stability. And so I think economic justice will be achieved when we have a living wage and also important consumer financial protections in place to prevent against scams that can threaten that economic stability. And what makes me excited about the future is we have this relatively new federal agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that was created by the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010 and is really just getting off the ground. And that federal agency has a special role to play in protecting consumers in the marketplace. And they're already issuing some very helpful regulations on topics ranging from mortgage servicing to prepaid cards to other debt collection issues. So I think there is a lot of progress that can be made, and I think I have a lot of hope for the future in us gaining more economic justice as a society.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your perspective, your expertise, and really making really concrete how these issues play out in survivors' lived realities. I think that is critical. And it reminds me that CSAJ's partnership with NCLC has really been formative to how we conceptualize collaboration, and now how we're able to work with advocates and communities across the country to marshal their own new and impactful resources to benefit survivors and to enhance survivors' access to economics and to enhance their economic security. So again, thank you. This is a wonderful spotlight for a wonderful partner. And just as a final note, all of the resources that you heard Sarah talk about and kind of more history on CSAJ's partnership with NCLC can be found on our website at www.csaj.org. And you can also go to NCLC's website for more on specific consumer guides and some other things Sarah's been talking about. So again, thank you for your partnership, Sarah, and thank you for working in partnership with us and being such a critical role in this work.
Thank you.